The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel blazed with the light of 1,000 black and crimson roses, each crystal chandelier casting blood-red shadows across the marble floor, where 300 of the most dangerous men and women in the criminal underworld mingled beneath bulletproof glass ceilings. Vincent Castellano stood at the edge of the room, his black Armani suit fitting him like a second skin, the faint scar along his left jaw a reminder of the night he had killed his first man at 18. They called him the Stone King, the man who had built the Castellano empire from the ashes of his father's murder, the man whose name made rival families cross themselves and pray. At 37, he controlled the entire East Coast, owned judges and politicians like chess pieces, and had never once shown mercy to those who crossed him. Yet standing here watching his fiancée Isabella Moretti glide through the crowd in her black silk gown, diamonds dripping from her throat like frozen tears, he felt something he rarely acknowledged: emptiness. Isabella was perfect on paper, the daughter of Don Salvatore Moretti, a strategic alliance that would unite two of the most powerful crime families in America. Their engagement had been announced 3 months ago at a meeting of the 5 families, and the wedding was scheduled 6 weeks from today. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but logic could not explain the hollow ache in his chest every time he looked at his future wife, or the way his mind kept drifting to a pair of green eyes he had tried to forget for 5 years. The next morning, his assistant Gianna informed him that a woman had been waiting since 6. She had 3 children with her and claimed it was a matter of life and death. Her name was Scarlett Hayes. The name hit Vincent like a bullet to the chest. Scarlett Hayes, the woman he had loved and lost 5 years ago when he chose a war with the Kozlov family over protecting her. His heart pounded as he walked down the corridor. 4 years of silence. What could possibly bring her back now? When the door opened, Scarlett stood by the window, backlit by the morning sun, and Vincent barely recognized her. She was thin, too thin, her collarbones jutting out beneath pale skin, dark circles carved deep under those green eyes that still haunted his dreams. Her clothes were worn and faded, her shoes held together with tape, and she stood with the rigid posture of someone who had learned to expect nothing but pain. Then he saw the children, 3 of them, identical in every way, boys around 3 years old with black hair and eyes that stopped his heart cold. They had his eyes, steel gray and sharp, his nose, the stubborn set of his jaw that he saw in the mirror every morning. They sat at the conference table coloring with crayons someone had found for them, and one of them, the smallest one, looked up at Vincent with curious eyes and coughed weakly, his lips slightly blue. Scarlett spoke quietly, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "These are your sons, Ethan, Noah, and Oliver. They are 4.5 years old, and Noah is dying. He has a congenital heart defect and needs surgery within the month or he will not survive." The room tilted violently. Vincent gripped the back of the chair until his knuckles went white. 4.5 years. He did the math automatically. They had separated 5 years ago. She had begged him to choose her just once, and he had chosen revenge against Kozlov instead. 2 months later she must have discovered she was pregnant, and he had never known, had lived in luxury while the mother of his children starved and struggled alone. The smallest boy, Noah, looked up at Vincent with those gray eyes, so like his own, and asked in a weak little voice if he was their daddy, and if he could make the pain in his chest go away. The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Vincent looked from the dying child to Scarlett's hollow cheeks to the other 2 boys who watched him with guarded hope, his entire world reshaping itself in the span of a single heartbeat. 48 hours ago, his future had been mapped out. Marriage to Isabella, unification of 2 crime empires, a predictable path to absolute power. Now standing in his office looking at 3 small boys who shared his blood, one of whom might not live to see another month, everything he thought he knew was crumbling. His phone buzzed, a message from Isabella saying she had finalized the wedding invitations and could not wait to become Mrs. Castellano, complete with a photo of her trying on wedding veils. Vincent stared at the message, then at his dying son, then at the woman who had survived hell alone because he had abandoned her. 2 worlds colliding in thunderous silence. If this story satisfies your soul, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs a good cry. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another heart-wrenching tale. Follow the journey as the Stone King discovers that the greatest battle of his life will not be fought with guns and blood, but with the tiny hands of 3 little boys reaching up to call him daddy. Vincent stood motionless like a stone statue, his gray eyes fixed on the 3 children, and then shifting to Scarlett with an expression that could not be read. He walked slowly to the door, locked it, then turned back to her and spoke in a low, gravel, rough voice like stones being crushed under a wheel. "Tell me everything, from the beginning. Do not leave out a single thing." Scarlett looked at him for a long time. Then she began to speak in a flat, emotionless voice, the voice of someone who had cried all her tears and no longer had the strength to feel pain. She said that 2 months after they separated, she discovered she was pregnant, not with 1 child but with 3. She panicked and came back to look for him, but Vincent had vanished into the war with the Kozlov family. No one knew where he was. No one would tell her anything. They only looked at her as if she were trash daring to step into their world. She said that when her father found out she was pregnant by a criminal, he threw her out of the house in the middle of a winter night. He was a police officer, and he said he would rather have no daughter than have a daughter who slept with the Mafia. Her mother stood behind him crying but did not dare say a word. Scarlett said that during the first 3 months of the pregnancy, she lived in her old car, parked in public lots, bathing in gas station bathrooms, eating whatever was cheapest she could buy, sometimes not eating at all, to save money for prenatal checkups. She told of giving birth alone at a public hospital, with no one holding her hand, no one telling her everything would be all right. She almost died from blood loss when the 3rd child was born, and the doctor said it was a miracle she survived. She told of the years that followed, working 18 hours a day at 3 different jobs, serving tables in the morning at a diner, cleaning offices in the afternoon, caring for the elderly on weekends, coming home at midnight and waking at 5 in the morning to feed the children. She told of the times the children were sick and she had to choose between medicine and rent, of the months when she ate only plain rice so the children could have milk, of the time she was fired for taking medicine from the hospital for her child when she did not have enough money to buy it. She said that last month Noah fainted in class. His lips turned blue and he could not breathe. The doctor said the child's heart could not endure any longer and needed surgery within 1 month. The cost was $200,000, a number she could never reach, even if she sold her life. She said she had considered selling a kidney, had contacted black market organ traffickers, but they said her kidney was only worth $30,000, and that was still not enough. Her voice remained flat, as if she were telling someone else's story, but her hands were trembling beyond her control. Vincent stood there listening, his fists clenched until his knuckles were white as bone, his jaw grinding until the muscles at his temples twitched beneath the skin. For the first time in 10 years, for the first time since he buried his father and swore never to let anyone see him weak, he felt something rise in his chest, stronger than rage. It was shame, it was guilt, it was the brutal awareness that while he slept on silk sheets and ate lavish feasts, the woman carrying his children had been slowly dying in poverty and despair. He looked down at the 3 children, looked into their gray eyes, and his chest felt as if it were being crushed by an iron hand. Oliver, the bravest child, suddenly stood up and ran to Vincent's side, looked up at him with clear eyes and asked in a child's hopeful voice, "Can you save Noah?" Mother cries every night when she thinks we are asleep. She asks, "God, please save Noah. Are you the one God sent?" Vincent looked down at the child, gazing up at him with clear, hopeful eyes, and something inside his chest shattered into a million pieces. He stood still for a few seconds, as if time itself had stopped. Then without saying a word, he pulled out his phone and dialed with fingers stiff as stone. His voice came out cold and commanding, when the other end answered, "Nathan, I need you at my office right now. Not an hour from now. Not 30 minutes from now. Right now. Bring everything you need to examine a 4.5-year-old child with a congenital heart condition, and bring a rush DNA test kit. I want confirmation immediately." He hung up without waiting for a reply, and immediately made a second call, his voice even sharper than before. "I need you to contact Mount Sinai Hospital. Find the best pediatric heart surgeon in the United States. I do not care where he is or what he is doing. Bring him to New York within 48 hours. If necessary, I will buy the entire hospital." Scarlett stood there staring at him with wide eyes, unable to believe what she was hearing. She opened her mouth to say something, but Vincent turned to her with a look that allowed no objection. He walked over to Noah, knelt down to the child's level, and for the first time Scarlett saw the Stone King look at someone with something other than coldness. There was an awkward gentleness in the way he reached out and touched the child's black hair. "You will not hurt anymore, I promise." Noah looked at him with tired gray eyes that still held a glimmer of hope, while Ethan held his brother tightly with the wary gaze of a child, already too familiar with protecting those he loved. Vincent stood up and looked at Scarlett, his voice no longer a question but an order. "You and the children will move to the Castellano estate. Today. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today." Scarlett shook her head and stepped back as if he had struck her. "No. I only need you to save Noah. After that we will leave. I do not want your money. I do not want anything from you except that you save my child." Vincent advanced toward her, each step sounding like a war drum, And when he stopped in front of her, Scarlett could see the fire burning in those cold gray eyes. "They are my children," he said slowly, each word as if carved into stone. "My children, my blood. No one touches what belongs to me. No one, not even you, has the right to take them away from me again." The door opened and Marco walked in, Vincent's younger brother, a man of 34 who looked almost exactly like him but a little softer. He froze when he saw the 3 children sitting at the conference table, his eyes widening in shock as he recognized the undeniable resemblance. Vincent turned to him, his voice short and absolute. "Prepare rooms at the estate for 4 people. Double the security. No one is to know of their existence until I allow it." Marco nodded without asking a single question. He looked at Scarlett one last time with a gaze that was both curious and sympathetic. Before leaving, Vincent's phone vibrated. The screen showed the name Isabella with a red heart beside it. She was calling to ask about the lunch they had planned, about trying on wedding dresses that afternoon, about the plans for their perfect marriage. Vincent looked at the screen for a second, then turned off the phone without answering. He turned back to Scarlett with a face that revealed no emotion. "Let us go. The doctor will come to the estate to examine Noah, and you will not argue with me about this." Oliver jumped down from his chair and ran to take Vincent's hand with the absolute trust of a child, while Ethan remained standing, watching him with eyes older than his age, as if weighing whether this man was worthy of being trusted. The 3 armored vehicles glided smoothly along the roads of Long Island in the late afternoon sunlight, and when the massive iron gates of the Castellano estate slowly opened, Scarlett felt as if she were stepping into a completely different world. The mansion rose before her like a medieval fortress rebuilt in the 21st century. Tall stone walls encircling the vast grounds, security cameras glinting at every corner like eyes that never slept, and men in black suits with the bearing of professional killers standing guard everywhere. When the car stopped in front of the main entrance, Oliver was the first to jump out, his gray eyes wide as saucers as he spun around, taking everything in. Then he shouted with pure excitement, "Mom, this house is as big as the whole world. I could run all day and never finish. Mom, look, there is even a fountain and a garden and trees as big as in fairy tales." Ethan stepped out after him. Unlike his brothers, Ethan was born with a watchful soul far beyond his years. He showed no excitement at all. Instead, he held his mother's hand tightly, his small body tense. His eyes didn't miss a thing as he scanned the men in black scattered across the courtyard, engaging in a silent assessment that was too sharp for a child his age. It was the instinct of a child who understood the world too well, long accustomed to being alert, long accustomed to protecting his mother and siblings in dangerous neighborhoods, made it impossible for him to trust anyone. Scarlett lifted Noah out of the car. The smallest child was still tired and pale. But when they went inside and walked down the corridor leading to the playroom door, Noah's eyes suddenly lit up for the first time in many weeks at the sight of a room overflowing with toys, electric cars, stuffed bears, Lego, and hundreds of things he had only ever seen through the glass of shops his mother could never afford to enter. An older woman appeared at the top of the stairs, her silver hair neatly pinned up and her brown eyes warm. She looked at Scarlett, then at the 3 children, and paused on their gray eyes. Eyes she had seen for nearly 40 years on Vincent's face, and before that on his father's. Teresa asked no questions. She only smiled with understanding and stepped forward to take Scarlett's hand as if she were family, returning after a long absence. "Let me show you and the children the rooms. I have prepared the largest room with a balcony overlooking the garden." But Scarlett shook her head, her voice soft but firm. "I want a smaller room, near the service stairs, near an emergency exit if possible. I do not need a large room." Teresa looked at her for a long moment with deep pity in her eyes. She said nothing more, and only nodded, as she led them to a smaller room at the end of the hall, exactly as Scarlett had asked. The first night in the mansion, after the children had been bathed and fed, Scarlett herself moved her bed so that it stood directly between the door and the children's beds, a habit she had formed during the years in a South Bronx tenement, where the door had no reliable lock, and danger could come at any time. She sat beside Noah's bed, held his tiny hand, and began to pray as she did every night, her lips moving with pleas to God to save her child, to give her more time, not to take Noah away while he was still so small. She did not know that Vincent was standing in the shadows outside the hallway, watching through the crack of the half-open door, his chest tightening with pain as he witnessed the woman he once loved, praying in despair beside the bed of the child he had never known existed. 2 days later, as the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the gardens of the Castellano estate, a sleek black Maserati swept through the main gate without stopping for inspection, because everyone on duty knew it was the car of Isabella Moretti, the woman who was about to become the mistress of this place. Isabella stepped out of the car with the stride of a queen, her tight red dress accentuating her perfect curves, her Louboutin heels striking the stone like drums announcing war, and she walked straight into the mansion, with the attitude of an owner no one dared to stop. Vincent had not answered her calls for 2 days, had cancelled their lunch, and the wedding dress fitting without a word of explanation, and Isabella Moretti was not the kind of woman who accepted being ignored. She was about to go straight up to the study to find Vincent when she suddenly stopped, her ears catching a sound that should not exist in this mansion. The laughter of children, clear and echoing through the corridor. Isabella froze, her sharp brown eyes narrowing. Then she changed direction and walked toward the playroom where the sound was coming from. When the door opened, Isabella felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach with a steel fist. 3 children were sitting on the floor playing with building blocks, the 2 older ones arguing over a piece while the smallest lay on a soft chair with a teddy bear in his hands. And when Oliver looked up at the strange woman who had just entered, Isabella saw gray eyes looking back at her, eyes she saw every day on the face of her fiancé. Isabella's face changed from white to red and then to pale within seconds. Her hands clenched into fists so tight that her perfectly painted red nails dug into her palms. She looked from one child to the next, and every face was a smaller copy of Vincent Castellano. Unmistakable, undeniable, Teresa stepped in behind Isabella, the old housekeeper's face showing a flicker of concern when she saw the master's fiancé standing there, like a statue with eyes burning with hatred. She tried gently to say that Miss Moretti should let the children rest, but Isabella raised her hand to stop her without turning around, her voice cold as ice. Let them stay. I want to look more closely at these children. Ethan sensed something dangerous in the stranger's gaze. The instinct honed by years in the slums made him immediately stand and pull Oliver behind him, his gray eyes fixed on Isabella with a wariness far beyond that of an ordinary 3.5-year-old. Isabella took out her phone and stepped a few paces away, her voice whispering into it like the hiss of a snake. Find out everything about a woman named Scarlett Hayes. I want to know who she is, where she comes from, what her connection to Vincent is. I want everything within 24 hours. And if any of you let this leak, I will make sure you no longer have a tongue to speak. She had just hung up when the door on the other side of the room opened, and Scarlett walked in, holding a cup of warm milk for Noah. She froze when she saw the strange woman standing in the middle of the room, staring at her children, as if she wanted to burn them alive. The 2 women looked at each other, one in an expensive dress with diamonds glittering at her ears, the other in worn clothes with dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep. And the air in the room suddenly thickened like the moment before a storm. Isabella was the first to break the silence. She walked toward Scarlett with the gait of a panther stalking its prey, her brown eyes sweeping over the woman before her from head to toe with undisguised contempt, taking in the tangled auburn hair, the deep dark circles under green eyes, the worn and frayed clothes and the shoes held together with tape. Then she let out a small, scornful laugh as if she had just seen something filthy stuck to the sole of her shoe. So who are you? Isabella said in a voice cold as ice. Which whore dares to bring bastard children into the home of my future husband? Or are you one of the girls who work at the strip club Vincent occasionally visits? Scarlett felt the blood rush to her face. She wanted to step back, but her legs refused to move. 4 years in hell had taught her that predators strike when prey runs, and she was no longer anyone's prey. I am the mother of these children, Scarlett replied in a trembling but firm voice. And they are not bastards. They are Vincent's children, whether you believe it or not. Isabella laughed coldly, the sound like breaking glass. What do you think you are, a stray cat who picked up a few children and came here to demand money? Or do you think you can use these children to force your way into the Castellano family, to steal my place? I did not come for money, Scarlett said, her voice growing steadier as she looked toward her children sitting silently watching, Ethan already standing in front of the younger 2 with wary eyes. I came because my child is dying. Noah needs surgery, and I have no other way. Isabella stepped closer until she was only a few inches from Scarlett, the scent of her expensive perfume washing over Scarlett's face like a weapon. Then she whispered in a voice meant only for them to hear, Listen, you ragged whore. I do not care whether your child lives or dies. After the wedding, I will make sure you and those children disappear forever. No one will ever find your bodies, and do not think Vincent will protect you. He is mine, always mine, and I do not share what belongs to me with anyone. At that moment, a weak coughing sound came from the corner of the room. Noah began to cough violently, his small face turning pale, and his lips shifting to a bluish purple. Scarlett instantly forgot the woman threatening her and ran to her child. She gathered Noah into her arms, rubbing his back and whispering reassurances, while Ethan and Oliver hurried to their mother and brother. Isabella stood watching the scene with eyes cold as ice. She observed the way Scarlett clutched the sick child, the fear in the other two children's eyes, and a slow, calculating smile formed on her lips as she recognized her rival's fatal weakness. Isabella turned and walked away, her heels cracking on the stone floor like gunshots. But at the door she stopped and looked back at Scarlett, with the gaze of a snake waiting for the moment to strike. "Enjoy your last days here. You will need them, because when I become Mrs. Castellano, the first thing I will do is sweep the trash out of my house." Isabella did not go looking for Vincent, but waited for him in the study. She sat on the black leather chair like a queen on a throne, her legs crossed perfectly, and her burning brown eyes fixed on the door until it opened. And Vincent stepped in with a face cold as stone. He did not seem surprised to see her there. He had known she would come from the moment the security cameras recorded the black Maserati gliding through the gate, and he had also known this confrontation would happen from the moment he decided to bring Scarlett and the children to the estate. Isabella rose and walked toward Vincent, with eyes he had never seen on her before. No longer the cool allure or the calculating smile, only pure fury burning like the fires of hell. "How do you intend to explain the 3 children in the playroom?" Isabella said with a calm that was already beginning to crack. "The children with your eyes, with your face, or are you going to tell me they are Marco's?" Vincent closed the study door, walked to the desk and poured himself a glass of whiskey, his movements slow and unhurried as if this were an ordinary conversation. Then he turned back to look at Isabella with gray eyes that revealed no emotion. "They are my children." Those 3 words were like 3 bullets fired straight into Isabella's chest. She staggered back a step as if someone had slapped her, her face shifting from fury to disbelief, and then to hatred in a few short seconds. "Your children," she hissed through clenched teeth, "with that ragged whore, with that piece of trash you picked up somewhere 4 years ago and threw away like an old toy." Vincent set the glass down on the desk with a sharp sound in the silence. Then he stood and walked toward Isabella, each step making her retreat until her back hit the wall, and when he stopped in front of her, his gray eyes had turned the color of a storm. "What did you just call the mother of my children?" Vincent asked in a low and dangerous voice, the voice his enemies heard before they died. "Would you like to say it again, Isabella?" Isabella realized she had gone too far. She saw something in Vincent's eyes she had never seen before, a cold ruthlessness ready to destroy anyone who threatened what he claimed as his, and for the first time she felt afraid of the man she was about to marry. She took a deep breath and changed tactics. Her voice grew softer but remained calculated. "Vincent, I understand you may have a past. Every man does. But you cannot keep those children and their mother here. Not now. Not when we are about to marry. My father will not accept this humiliation." She issued her ultimatum in a voice cold as steel. "Send them away or the Castellano-Moretti alliance is over. My father will see this as betrayal, and you know what happens to those who betray the Moretti family. Choose Vincent, power and empire, or those bastard children." Vincent stood silent for a long moment, his eyes looking through Isabella as if she were only a pane of glass. Then he stepped back and turned to the window, gazing out at the garden where the evening shadows were beginning to fall. "You may go tell Don Moretti that I need time to think," Vincent said without turning around, his voice steady and without hesitation. "But I warn you once and only once, Isabella, never call my children that again. Never threaten them or their mother, because if you do, I will forget that you are Don Moretti's daughter, and I will treat you as I treat anyone who dares to threaten my family." Isabella looked at him with eyes burning with hatred. She opened her mouth to say something more, but then thought better of it. She turned and left the study with her heels striking in anger. But when the door closed behind her, there was not only hatred in her sharp brown eyes, but also fear. The fear that she was losing something she had thought was firmly in her grasp. The night before the surgery, Mount Sinai Hospital was wrapped in the particular silence of places where the boundary between life and death is as thin as a thread, and Scarlett sat beside Noah's bed in the private room. Vincent had paid an enormous sum to secure so that his son would receive the best possible care. Noah was asleep, his small, pale face resting still on the white pillow, the wires and tubes leading from his little body to the monitors, making a steady beeping sound, like the heartbeat of hope. And Scarlett held his hand tightly, not daring to let go even for a second. Ethan and Oliver had fallen asleep on the sofa in the corner, the 2 brothers curled into each other like kittens, Oliver clutching Mr. Bear, Noah's old worn teddy bear he had promised to hold so his brother would not be afraid, and Ethan, even in sleep, kept one hand on his brother's shoulder as if guarding him. Scarlett looked at her 3 children and felt fear crushing her chest. Tomorrow the doctors would open Noah's chest and touch that tiny heart. Tomorrow her son might be saved or might never open his eyes to look at her again, and she could not bear that thought. She stood and stepped into the hallway because she did not want the children to wake and see her cry. She walked to the end of the corridor, where the light was dimmest, and slid down the wall. Then let the tears fall without restraint, the sobs rising from deep in her chest, as if she were trying to release 4 years of suffering in a single night. She did not hear footsteps, did not know Vincent had come until a warm coat was placed over her shoulders, and she looked up to see him standing there, gray eyes looking down at her with something she could not name. Vincent said nothing. He simply sat down beside her on the cold hospital floor, his expensive Armani suit touching the dirty tiles without his caring. And they sat there in silence for a long time until Scarlett spoke, her voice hoarse from crying. "I used to hate you," she said without looking at him, her eyes fixed on the opposite wall. "Every night the children were sick, and I had no money for medicine. I hated you. Every time I had to choose between milk and rent, I hated you. Every time. Noah cried in pain and I could do nothing but hold him. I hated you for not being there." "I deserve to be hated," Vincent answered in a low, rough voice, not defending, not explaining, only a simple and brutal acknowledgement of his own guilt. "But I cannot." Scarlett turned to look at him for the first time, her green eyes wet meeting his gray eyes in the dim light. "Because every time I look at them I see you. Ethan has the way you tilt your head when you think, Oliver has your smile, and Noah has your eyes. How could I hate the father of my children when I see you in them every day?" Vincent was silent for a moment, then asked, his voice lower, almost a whisper, "Why did you not come to me sooner?" "I tried," Scarlett replied bitterly. "I came back to look for you 2 months after we separated, but you had disappeared into the war with Kozlov. No one would tell me where you were, and when I finally found you, you were already the Stone King, the name that made the underworld tremble. I was afraid you would take my children away, afraid you would see them as a burden and hand them to someone else to raise, or worse, that your enemies would use them to threaten you and my children would become targets." Vincent turned to look at her, and under the dim hallway light, Scarlett saw something change in his gray eyes, something soft and painful she had never imagined could exist in a man like him. He lifted his hand slowly and gently and wiped the tears from her cheek. Scarlett flinched at the touch, her body tightening like a drawn string. Because 4 years alone had taught her that no one touched her without wanting something. "How long has it been?" Vincent asked when he noticed her reaction, his voice so gentle she almost did not recognize it as the Stone King speaking. "How long has it been since anyone touched you with kindness?" Scarlett did not answer, but her eyes said everything. 4 years. 4 years with no one to lean on, no one to rub her back when she cried, no one to hold her hand when she was afraid. And Vincent felt guilt twist in his chest like a knife. They sat there in silence, shoulders touching on the cold hospital floor, no one needing to speak, until the first light of dawn began to slip through the windows and a nurse came to say it was time to prepare Noah for surgery. At 6 in the morning, nurses in pale blue uniforms came to wheel Noah's bed toward the operating room, and Scarlett walked beside him, holding his tiny hand and refusing to let go until they reached the final door she was not allowed to pass. Noah lay on the bed, looking small and fragile, like a leaf that could be carried away at any moment, his gray eyes wide as he looked at his mother with a fear a 3.5-year-old tried to hide. Then he asked in a trembling voice, "Mom, I will be better, right? I will be able to run and play with Ethan and Oliver, right?" Scarlett felt her heart shatter into a million pieces. She bent down and kissed his forehead and tried to smile, though tears were ready to spill. "You will be well. The best doctors in the world will heal you. And when you wake up, I will be right here waiting for you." Noah turned his head to look behind him where Vincent stood motionless like a statue, the child's gray eyes meeting the gray eyes of the father he had only met a few days before. Then he asked in a voice so small it was almost a whisper, "Dad, will you be here when I wake up too?" Vincent stepped to the bed. He reached out and took the child's other tiny hand, and when he spoke his voice trembled slightly despite his effort to control it. "I will be here. I promise you. I will not go anywhere." Noah smiled, a weak but trusting smile. Then the operating room door opened, and they wheeled the bed inside. Scarlett stood watching until the door closed and swallowed her son within. The 6 hours of waiting began like a nightmare with no end. Scarlett paced the waiting room like a caged animal, unable to sit still for more than a minute. Unable to eat, though, Teresa brought food. Unable to drink, though, her throat was dry as sand. She could only walk and walk and walk until her legs felt ready to give way. Vincent sat in his chair with the calm exterior of the Stone King the underworld feared. But anyone who looked closely would see his knuckles white from gripping the chair. His jaw clenched so hard his temples twitched, and his eyes never left the operating room door for a second. Ethan sat beside Vincent, silent for the first 2 hours, then suddenly asked in a worried voice, "Why is it taking so long? What are the doctors doing for so long? Does Noah hurt? Dad, does Noah hurt?" Vincent looked down at the son he had barely begun to know as his own. He did not know what to say, how to comfort him. Finally, he only placed a hand on Ethan's head and said that Noah was asleep, so he did not hurt. The doctors were fixing his heart so he could run and play with his brothers. Oliver sat curled in a corner of the chair, both arms wrapped tightly around Mr. Bear as if his life depended on keeping the teddy safe. He whispered to the bear in a trembling voice. Noah said, "If I hold Mr. Bear, he will not be afraid. So I will hold him very tight so Noah will not be afraid." "Okay, Mr. Bear." Marco arrived in the third hour. He stepped into the waiting room and froze at the sight before him. Vincent Castellano, the Stone King, the feared and cold Mafia boss, sitting with one child leaning against his shoulder and another asleep on his lap, and for the first time in his life, Marco saw his brother look like a father instead of a king of the dark world. The 4th hour passed. Then the 5th. Scarlett was so exhausted she had to sit down, but still could not stop trembling. Her hands clasped together and her lips moving in prayers. She was not sure anyone heard. Then came the 6th hour. The operating room door suddenly opened, and everyone sprang to their feet like coiled springs, their hearts stopping for a moment as the surgeon in his scrubs stepped out, his face revealing no emotion at all. The doctor slowly removed his mask, and in that moment time seemed to stop. Scarlett could not breathe. Vincent did not blink. Ethan and Oliver held each other's hands as if awaiting a verdict that would decide their lives. Then the doctor smiled, a tired but radiant smile of someone who had just defeated death, and he said the 2 words Scarlett would remember for the rest of her life. The surgery was successful. Scarlett's legs gave way as if someone had pulled all the bones out of her body, but before she hit the floor, Vincent was there, his arm coming around her back to catch her in time. And she cried as she had never cried before, the sobs breaking free from deep in her chest, as if 4 years of suffering had finally found a way out. Ethan and Oliver jumped up, shouting with joy. Oliver ran around the waiting room yelling, "Noah is better, Noah is better. He is not going to die anymore," while Ethan stood there sobbing. The boy who had tried to be strong for so long, finally allowing himself to be weak. The doctor explained that Noah would need a few weeks to recover, and careful monitoring at first, but that tiny heart had been repaired perfectly, and the boy would be as healthy as any other child. He would be able to run, to play, to live a normal life. 2 hours later, Noah was moved to the recovery room, and when Scarlett was allowed to see him, she ran to the bed and knelt down, her eyes fixed on the small face, still pale but already a little more pink than before. Noah opened his eyes slowly, his gray eyes hazy with anesthesia, and the first thing he did was search, his lips moving to whisper a single word. "Mom," Scarlett sobbed as she gathered him into her arms, careful not to touch the incision. She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, each tiny finger. "I am here, my love. You did so well. You were so brave." Ethan and Oliver were allowed in afterward. The 2 boys climbed onto the bed and lay on either side of their brother. Careful as if holding a fragile treasure, Oliver whispered in Noah's ear that he had held Mr. Bear very tightly for 6 hours so Noah would not be afraid, right? While Ethan said nothing, only held his brother's hand and cried silently. Noah smiled weakly at them. Then he said in a voice as small as breath, "It does not hurt anymore. My chest does not hurt anymore. I can breathe without pain." Scarlett cried harder when she heard that. She had not known her son had been enduring pain with every breath without ever complaining. Then Noah looked toward the corner of the room where Vincent stood watching in silence, standing like an outsider, unsure if he was allowed into this sacred moment. And Noah lifted his tiny hand and waved weakly. "Dad, come here. Why are you standing so far away?" The whole room seemed to freeze. Scarlett turned to look at her son with wide, unbelieving eyes. She had not known Noah knew. She had never told the children who their father was, had never had the courage to explain why they did not have a father like other children. Noah looked at his mother and explained in a weak but clear voice, "You have Dad's picture in your wallet. I saw it. Every night. When you think we are asleep, you take it out and look at it and cry. I know it is Dad, because his eyes are like mine." Vincent walked to the bed, each step heavy as stone. He sat on the chair beside it and reached out. The rough, scarred hand of the Mafia boss, taking the tiny, soft hand of his son. And in that moment there was no Stone King, no ruler of the underworld, only a father touching his child for the first time with burning eyes. Oliver suddenly spoke to break the silence. "Dad, you will stay with us forever, right? You will not disappear like Tommy's dad at the old boarding house, right?" Vincent looked at Scarlett, their eyes meeting over the bed of their shared child. Then he looked down at the 3 children waiting for his answer with hopeful eyes. And he said in a voice as firm as a vow, "I will be here. I promise you, I will not go anywhere." 3 weeks after the surgery, The Castellano estate was filled with a warmth these cold walls had not known for decades. Noah had finally been discharged and brought back to the estate to finish his recovery. The smallest child was still weak and needed much rest, but his cheeks were rosier, and his smile had returned to his little face. Teresa cared for him as if he were her own grandchild, cooking special porridge and telling him fairy tales whenever he had to take his medicine. Oliver had turned the vast garden into his personal playground. He ran everywhere like a small whirlwind, shouting with delight and discovering every corner of the new world he had once only dared to dream of. Ethan found his own paradise in the great library of the estate. He sat for hours among shelves that reached the ceiling, devouring everything from fairy tales to encyclopedias, his gray eyes shining with the joy books gave him. Vincent spent more time at home than he ever had in his life. He often stopped by Noah's room to check on him, stood outside the library watching Ethan read, or sat on the porch watching Oliver run in the garden with a small smile he did not even realize was on his lips. Everything seemed to be settling into the rhythm of a normal family, until that afternoon, when Marco appeared with a pale face and pulled Vincent into the study with urgency. Vincent looked at his brother and knew at once something was wrong. He closed the door and asked in a cold voice, "What is it?" Marco did not answer with words. He only placed a brown envelope on the desk with slightly trembling hands. "It was delivered to the office this morning. No sender, no trace." Vincent opened the envelope and felt his blood freeze when he saw what was inside. They were photographs, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, of the 3 children playing in the estate garden, Oliver running, Ethan reading under a tree, Noah being held in Scarlett's arms, every face clear and sharp as if the photographer had been standing right in the garden. A small slip of paper fell from the envelope. On it was a handwritten line in red ink like blood. "The enemy's children, the new weakness of the Stone King. Interesting. Signed Kozlov." Vincent stood motionless for a second. Then rage erupted like a volcano. He ground his teeth and crushed the phone on the desk with his bare hand, glass and metal cutting into his skin, but he felt no pain. Only pure fury burning through every cell of his body. "Find who took these photographs." Vincent roared in a voice Marco had never heard from his brother. "Find the one who betrayed me and kill him. I want his head on my desk before the sun sets." Marco swallowed and reported what he had uncovered since morning. There was a traitor among their ranks. One of the guards assigned to watch the garden had disappeared last night along with a large sum of money, and when Marco traced that money, it led to an account linked to the Moretti family, more specifically to Isabella. Vincent froze at the sound of that name, every piece suddenly falling into place. Isabella had sold information about Scarlett and the children to Kozlov to take revenge on him for refusing to send them away. She had placed his children in the sights of the most dangerous enemy he had ever had, locked down the entire estate. Vincent ordered in a voice cold as ice but with eyes burning like hell, "Triple the security. No one is to enter or leave without my permission. If Kozlov wants to touch my children, he will have to step over my dead body first." Scarlett sensed something was wrong the next morning, when she looked out the window and saw that the number of guards had tripled. Men in black scattered through the garden with tense faces and hands, never far from the weapons hidden beneath their jackets. She tried to take the children outside to play as usual, but was stopped at the door by 2 guards who were polite but firm. They said there were orders from the boss that no one was to leave the estate until further notice. Oliver cried because he could not go out to run. Ethan looked at his mother with worried eyes, asking what was happening, and Noah stayed silent, clutching Mr. Bear as if he felt the tension in the air. Scarlett left the children in the playroom with Teresa and went straight up to the study. She pushed the door open without knocking and saw Vincent standing at the window with his back to her, his posture rigid as stone, and the air in the room cold as winter. "What is happening?" Scarlett asked directly. "Why are we not allowed to leave? Why are there so many guards? What are you hiding from me?" Vincent turned to look at her, his gray eyes no longer holding the warmth she had glimpsed in recent days, only the cold of the Stone King and something darker beneath it. He was silent for a moment, then walked to the desk, picked up the brown envelope and handed it to her. "You would find out sooner or later." Scarlett opened the envelope and felt her blood freeze when she saw the pictures of her children, her heart seeming to stop when she read the blood-red words, her hands trembling so badly the photos fell to the floor like dead leaves. "My children are being targeted because of you," she whispered in a shaking voice. "Someone is threatening my children because they are yours." Vincent did not deny it. He only looked at her with an unreadable gaze and said that Kozlov was his most dangerous enemy. They had been at war for 4 years, and now he had found Vincent's weakness. Scarlett stepped back as if she had been struck. For 4 years she had tried to keep her children far from this dangerous world. For 4 years she had lived in poverty just to keep them safe. And now, after only a few weeks here, her children had become targets for killers. "Let us go," she said firmly, though panic was tearing through her. "We are not safe here. I will take the children and disappear. I did it once and I can do it again. No one will ever find us." Vincent shook his head, his voice cold and allowing no argument. "You think you can hide from Kozlov? He has eyes and ears everywhere. He will find you within a week, and then there will be no one to protect you. And the children, then put us into witness protection," Scarlett almost shouted. "Send us abroad. Do anything but let us leave here. I cannot let my children live in fear like this." "No," Vincent replied with a single word heavy with authority. "The children will stay here, under my protection. This is the safest place for them." "You have no right to imprison us," Scarlett shouted with eyes burning in anger. "You have no right to decide our lives. They are my children. I raised them alone for 4 years and I do not need your permission to protect them." And that was when something in Vincent broke. He spun around with eyes blazing like coals. His voice thundered. "They are my children. Do you understand? My children. I lost them for 4 years. 4 years I did not know they existed while you raised 3 children alone in hell. 4 years I did not see them grow, did not hear them call me dad, was not there when Noah suffered with his broken heart. I will not lose them again. I cannot lose them again." Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket after that outburst. Scarlett stood, staring at Vincent with wide eyes. For the first time she saw what lay behind the stone mask of the Stone King. Not cruelty, not control, but pure fear. The fear of losing what he had just found. Vincent turned away and went back to the window. His shoulders tight, his voice lowered almost to a whisper, but each word heavy as stone. "You will stay here because this is the safest place. And I will kill anyone who dares touch my children, even if I have to burn this entire world to protect them." 2 weeks passed. In an atmosphere stretched tight as a breaking string, Noah had recovered enough for the doctors to allow him outside, and Vincent finally agreed to let Scarlett take the children for their routine hospital checkup, on the condition that the security convoy include 10 men and 3 armored SUVs. That morning the sky was clear and the sun warm. Oliver was excited because it was the first time he had left the estate after 2 weeks of confinement. He bounced on the back seat and kept asking when they would arrive, while Ethan sat silently staring out the window with wary eyes as if waiting for something bad to happen, and Noah leaned his head against his mother's shoulder with Mr. Bear in his arms, still tired but much better. The appointment went smoothly. The doctor said Noah was recovering better than expected, and only needed to continue his medication regularly for his heart to be completely healthy within a few months. Scarlett breathed out in relief as the convoy began the return to the estate. She held Noah close and watched Oliver happily telling Ethan about everything he had seen on the way. She thought maybe things would be all right. Maybe Vincent was right that this was the safest place. But she was wrong. The convoy was passing through a quiet stretch of road when 4 black SUVs suddenly appeared from both sides. They surged forward to block the front and rear of the convoy at terrifying speed, and before anyone could react, gunfire ripped through the peaceful morning. Scarlett screamed and shoved the children down to the floor of the car. She used her body to shield them as bullets flew like rain around them, the sound of shattering glass, clashing metal, screams and gunshots blending into a symphony of hell. The guards fought like mad, but they were outnumbered. There were at least 20 attackers, and they fired without mercy. One guard fell after another, and Scarlett knew they could not hold out long. Ethan held Noah tightly on the floor, with eyes full of fear but without crying, trying to protect his brother, as he had done for 3.5 years. But Oliver, the bravest and most reckless child, crawled toward the car door, trying to see what was happening. "Mom, they are shooting at us," Oliver cried in panic, and that was the moment a masked gunman tore open the armored door from outside, reached in and grabbed Oliver, dragging him out as the boy struggled wildly. Oliver bit the kidnapper's hand with all the strength of a 3.5-year-old. He kicked and scratched and screamed with a heart-ripping voice. "Let me go! Dad! Dad, save me!" Scarlett lunged toward the door, trying to pull her son back, but a bullet tore into her shoulder. Pain like fire knocked her backward, blood soaking her clothes, but she still reached out for her son being dragged away. Ethan tried to run after his brother, but Scarlett grabbed him with her other hand and held him tight. "No, my child, do not. I cannot lose both of you." The attackers withdrew as quickly as they had appeared. The black SUVs vanished down a side road, carrying Oliver away, the boy's cries echoing in the air, then fading, leaving dead silence and the stench of gunpowder. Scarlett lay on the car floor in blood, one arm clutching Ethan and Noah, who were sobbing, the other pressing against her bleeding shoulder, and she screamed in unbearable pain. "Oliver, my son, Oliver." 30 minutes later, Vincent's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Attached was a short video. In it, Oliver was tied to a chair, his small face wet with tears and bruises, his lips trembling as he looked into the camera and sobbed. "Dad, save me. I am scared. Dad, I want to go home to Mom and my brothers. Dad." Vincent watched the video with a face that held no emotion at all. But anyone who looked into his eyes would see something more frightening than rage, the cold emptiness of a man who had crossed the edge of madness and stepped into a place where no law had any meaning. The Stone King vanished in that moment, replaced by a father whose son had just been torn from him. And the most dangerous thing in this world is not a ruthless mafia boss, but a father who has nothing left to lose. Vincent slammed the phone onto the table and shouted in a voice that echoed through the estate. "Gather everyone, now." Within an hour, more than 50 men armed to the teeth had assembled in the great hall of the Castellano estate. The coldest killers, the sharpest shooters, the most brutal interrogators his empire possessed. All standing in silence, waiting for orders from their master. "Find my son," Vincent said in a low, dangerous voice like the growl of a beast before it strikes. "Kill anyone who stands in your way. No exceptions, no mercy. I want Kozlov on his knees before me, before the sun rises. And if a single hair on my son's head is harmed, I will burn his entire bloodline to the last person." Marco led the investigation with a frenzy equal to his brother's. He mobilized every source, every eye on the streets, every informant the Castellano family had bought over decades, and information began to pour in like a flood. Vincent personally interrogated 2 attackers captured alive from the ambush. He walked into the dark basement in a black suit, as if attending a party, and what happened in that room over the next 2 hours made even his most loyal men turn away. Vincent tortured them with the cold patience of a craftsman at work. No anger, no haste, only method and calculated cruelty. And finally one of them confessed everything with a voice begging for death. Kozlov was holding the child in an abandoned warehouse in Queens. About 20 gunmen were guarding it. He planned to use the boy to force Vincent to surrender and hand over all his East Coast territory. While that mad hunt unfolded, back at the estate, Scarlett was having her shoulder wound dressed by a doctor, but she refused to lie down. She sat on the bed with eyes empty like someone whose soul was gone, her trembling hand clutching the small shirt Oliver had left behind in the room that morning. Ethan sat in the corner, silent as a statue. He had not spoken a word since he saw his brother dragged away, his gray eyes empty, staring into nothing, as if part of his soul had been taken with Oliver. Noah crawled to his mother's side. The smallest child, still weak and not understanding what was happening, he asked in a worried, faint voice. "Mom, will Oliver come back? Why is everyone crying? Why is Oliver not here playing with me?" Scarlett held Noah tightly, though her shoulder throbbed with pain. She swallowed her sobs and whispered into his ear with a trembling voice, trying to sound strong. "Your father will bring Oliver back. I promise you. He will bring your brother home to us." Night fell. Vincent assembled a strike team of 20 men, all his most elite fighters ready to die on his command. He looked at each face and said in a voice cold as steel, "We go. Tonight my son comes home, or we all die trying to bring him back." Night fell like a black curtain over New York City. The black convoy of the Castellano family glided through the roads of Queens in a deadly quiet with no headlights and no sound. Like shadows moving toward hell, Vincent sat in the back seat with a loaded gun in his hand, gray eyes fixed on the darkness ahead, his face empty of emotion, while a storm raged inside him. The abandoned warehouse emerged in the weak streetlight, an old, decaying building with sealed windows and barbed wire around it. Kozlov's men were guarding the outside with automatic weapons. Unaware that death was approaching in the dark, Marco caught his brother's arm before Vincent opened the car door and pleaded that as the boss he should not lead the charge and should let the others handle it. Vincent looked at him with eyes cold as ice, and said without allowing any argument that his child was inside and no one in the world could stop him from going in. The attack began suddenly and quietly as the outer guards were neutralized before any alarm could be raised. Then chaos broke loose. When Vincent forced the main door and rushed inside like a force of nature, his weapon moving with deadly precision, the attackers fired back, but they were no match for the Castellano men, and no match for a father searching for his child. Vincent moved forward without hesitation or fear, as if death itself had no right to touch him, and by some terrible grace he reached the end of the dark corridor, where he broke open the last door, and his heart nearly stopped at what he saw inside. Oliver was on a wooden chair with his hands bound behind him, his small face marked by tears and bruises, gray eyes swollen from crying. And when he saw Vincent in the doorway, those eyes lit up as if the sun had risen in the middle of the night. "Dad," Oliver sobbed in a hoarse voice. "Dad, you came. I knew you would come. I told them my dad is the strongest in the world and he would come save me." Vincent ran to him, knelt and cut the rope from his small wrists. His hands trembling despite his effort to stay steady, And when Oliver was free, the boy threw himself into his arms and clung to his neck as if afraid he would vanish if he let go. Vincent held him tight, tighter than he had ever held anyone, and for the first time in many years his eyes burned and blurred. "I am sorry," he whispered into his son's hair. "I should have protected you. I should not have let this happen." Oliver held him tighter and whispered back with small but trusting certainty that it was all right and that he was not afraid anymore because his dad was here. Vincent stood with Oliver in his arms, the child wrapped around him and refusing to let go, and walked back through the dark building and out into the night, not looking back, not caring about anything but the small breath against his neck and the fast-beating heart in his arms. And as he stepped into the darkness with Oliver safe, Vincent Castellano knew he would burn the whole world if he had to so that he would never again face the terror of losing his child. The convoy returned to the Castellano estate at first light, and Scarlett was waiting at the front doors with her shoulder still bandaged, her eyes swollen from crying all night. But when she saw Vincent step out of the car with Oliver in his arms, she ran to them despite the pain tearing through her shoulder. Oliver saw his mother and reached out. "Mom," he sobbed as Scarlett took him from Vincent's arms. "Mom, I was so scared, but Dad came and saved me. Dad killed all the bad people." Scarlett held him tight and cried, unable to speak, only clinging to the son she thought she had lost forever. And letting the tears fall without control, Ethan ran out from the house. He had not slept all night, and when he saw his brother, the stoic mask finally cracked. He rushed forward and wrapped Oliver in his arms, crying for the first time since the kidnapping. "Oliver, you came back," he sobbed, clutching his brother desperately. "I tried to pull you back. I wasn't strong enough. I'm sorry I let them take you. I'm so sorry." Noah was carried out by Teresa. The smallest child saw the family reunited and began to cry too without understanding why, only knowing that Oliver was back and that it was a good thing. The family held each other in the courtyard in the dawn light, and Vincent stood watching them, watching Scarlett cry with her children in her arms, watching the three children cling to one another as if afraid of being torn apart again, and he knew he would do anything to protect this family. 2 days later, after Oliver had been examined and found to have only minor bruises, Vincent summoned Don Moretti and Isabella to the estate. They sat in the study, Don Salvatore Moretti in a gray suit with the stern face of an old boss, Isabella beside him with the confidence of someone who did not know she was walking into a trap. Vincent placed a folder on the desk and slid it toward Don Moretti, his voice cold as ice. "Before we discuss anything else, you should see this." Don Moretti opened the folder and his face gradually changed as he read through the pages. The evidence of Isabella's contact with Kozlov, the records of transfers from her accounts to the traitor in the Castellano ranks, the messages in which Isabella gave information about Scarlett and the children to the enemy. "You are lying." Isabella jumped up pale. "You forged this to turn my father against me. Do not believe him." "Be quiet!" Don Moretti roared, making Isabella step back. He looked at his daughter with eyes she had never seen before, eyes of disgust and utter disappointment. "You sold information to Kozlov. You put children's lives in the hands of the enemy out of jealousy." Isabella realized everything was exposed and she had nothing left to lose. Her face twisted from fear into hatred. She screamed shrilly that yes, she had done it. She had sold the information because Vincent chose that ragged woman and those children over her, that she was Don Moretti's daughter and deserved to be Mrs. Castellano, not some trash picked up from the street. Don Moretti stood and slapped Isabella hard, sending her back into the chair, his face red with fury, as he told her she had shamed the Moretti family and broken the most sacred rule by harming children, and that she was no longer his daughter. Vincent stood and looked down at Isabella on the chair with the red mark on her cheek, his voice cold and without emotion, as he told her their engagement was over, and that she was nothing to him now, and that if not for respect for Don Moretti, she would already be dead. Don Moretti turned to Vincent and did something no one expected. He held out his hand and said that a man who protected his children deserved respect, that the Castellano-Moretti alliance would remain, but Isabella was no longer his daughter, and Vincent could do with her as he wished. Isabella was disowned by her father and lost everything in a single night. From the cherished daughter of Don Moretti with a brilliant future as the mistress of the Castellano Empire, she became an outcast with no family, no status, nothing left but the hatred burning through every cell of her body. 1 week after that fateful meeting, Isabella vanished from her Manhattan apartment, and no one knew where she went. Vincent had people look for her, but she seemed to evaporate into thin air, and he knew that a snake driven into a corner is the most dangerous of all. And he was right. Marco received word from the informant network one evening while the family was having dinner that a professional assassin from Chicago had been hired for $50,000, paid in cash from the sale of the diamond engagement ring. She had hidden to kill a woman named Scarlett Hayes, and the one who hired him was a dark-haired woman matching Isabella Moretti's description. Vincent showed no surprise when he heard this. He only nodded to Marco and continued eating as if he had just heard the weather forecast. But his gray eyes had turned the color of a storm, and Scarlett knew someone was about to pay a terrible price. Marco's team captured the assassin before he could reach the estate, and after a few hours of questioning in the basement, he confessed everything, including the address of the cheap hotel where Isabella was hiding and waiting for news of Scarlett's death. Vincent went to that hotel alone at midnight. He needed no guards and no weapon. He only needed to face the woman who had almost taken the life of his children's mother. When he pushed the door open, Isabella was sitting on the bed with tangled black hair and wild eyes. No longer the proud, beautiful woman he had once been engaged to. Only a hollow shell filled with hatred and despair. "Are you here to kill me?" Isabella gave a bitter laugh, though her voice trembled. "Go on then. Do it. I have nothing left to lose." Vincent looked at her with eyes holding not a trace of emotion. No anger, no hatred, only a cold indifference as if he were looking at an insect beneath his heel. "I once had everything," Isabella burst out in a broken voice. "I was about to become Mrs. Castellano. I had you. I had power. I had a future. And then that ragged woman appeared with her bastard children, and you took everything from me." Vincent stepped closer, his voice cold as ice when he answered that she had destroyed herself, that she had placed innocent children's lives in the hands of an enemy out of jealousy, and hired someone to kill the mother of his children, and that he was only the witness to the ruin she had created with her own hands. He took out an envelope and tossed it onto the bed in front of her. Inside was a fake passport, a one-way ticket to South America, and $10,000 in cash. "You have 1 hour to leave New York," Vincent said in a voice as cold as a death sentence. "After that, I will forget you ever existed, and I will treat you as I treat anyone who threatens my family. You know what happens to those people, Isabella. You have seen what I did to Kozlov's men." Isabella looked into those ice-cold gray eyes and knew he was not joking. She knew that if she stayed or tried to take revenge again, she would not only die but die in a way beyond imagining. She took the envelope with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face, and when Vincent turned and walked out, she knew that the life she had known was completely over. That night, a taxi took Isabella Moretti to JFK Airport, and she vanished into the darkness like a ghost. The final threat had been removed. 3 months after Isabella disappeared, and every threat had been removed, the Castellano estate underwent a transformation these cold walls had never witnessed in their entire existence. Children's laughter echoed through corridors that had once known only silence and shadow. Toys lay scattered everywhere, instead of expensive paintings and lifeless antiques. And the Stone King, the most ruthless mafia boss on the East Coast, was learning how to be a father in the most awkward and unexpectedly tender way imaginable. The first morning Vincent woke up with his fingernails painted a bright pink, he stared down at them in horror and heard stifled giggles outside the bedroom door. The 3 children had sneaked in while he had fallen asleep on the sofa after working late and turned him into a victim of a mobile nail salon. Marco walked into the meeting room that morning and nearly choked when he saw his brother issuing orders with pink hands he had not managed to clean. One day, Oliver declared he wanted long hair like Princess Rapunzel and demanded that his father braid it. Vincent looked at his son's short hair, then at a braiding tutorial on his phone, and tried for an entire hour, producing something that looked more like a crow's nest than any human hairstyle. Oliver burst into tears because it was so ugly, and Scarlett had to rush in to rescue them while trying not to laugh until her stomach hurt. Hide and seek became the family's favorite evening game, and once Vincent hid under the living room bed, thinking the children would never find him, forgetting that his shoulders were too broad. And when he tried to crawl out, he got stuck. The children found him flailing like a stranded fish, and laughed until they rolled on the floor, while 2 guards had to lift the bed to free their boss, whose face was red with embarrassment. Teresa decided to teach Vincent how to make pancakes because the children loved them for breakfast, and the Mafia boss who once ran a billion-dollar empire burned 3 batches in a row. The first black as coal, the second so charred it set off the fire alarm throughout the estate, the third looking fine on the outside but still raw inside, until Teresa finally pushed him out of the kitchen and took over, while Vincent stood watching with the face of a student who had just failed an exam. But between those humorous moments were the warm ones Vincent would carry forever. Every night he sat by the children's beds reading fairy tales in his low voice about princesses and princes, dragons and castles, and the 3 children listened with shining gray eyes until they fell asleep, smiling. Noah grew stronger every day. The child who had once been pale and fragile could now run and play with his brothers, his laughter ringing through the garden like music, and every time Vincent heard it, he silently thanked heaven for giving him the chance to save his son. Ethan, the most guarded and withdrawn, slowly opened up. And one day, when Vincent came to fetch him from the library, the boy ran to him and called him Dad instead of Uncle for the first time, and Vincent had to turn away so Ethan would not see his eyes filling with tears. Vincent quietly transformed an empty room in the estate into an art studio for Scarlett. Remembering that she once said her dream had been to become a painter before life forced her to give everything up, and when he led her into the room, filled with easels, brushes, paints, and natural light pouring through the large windows, Scarlett cried and hugged him for the first time since she returned. Vincent reduced his work in the underworld, leaving Marco to manage most of it, and spending more time with his family than he ever had before. Every weekend, the family went to the park. Vincent pushed the children on the swings, grilled barbecue in the garden, even though his meat still ended up more burned than golden, and the guards watching from a distance could hardly believe their eyes when they saw the Stone King lying flat on the grass, letting 3 children climb on his back like a horse while they squealed with delight. One afternoon, Scarlett stood at the studio window looking down at the garden where Vincent was playing tag with the children, their laughter filling the air, and the late sunlight casting a golden glow over them like a perfect painting. She placed a hand over her heart and felt it beating with a new rhythm. No longer fear, no longer anxiety, only hope, and for the first time in 4 years, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps everything really would be all right, that perhaps her family had finally found where it belonged. On an autumn evening when the leaves had begun to turn gold and red and a cool chill slipped through the windows of the estate, after the 3 children had been read their stories and were sleeping soundly in the warm room, with Mr. Bear lying between them, Vincent and Scarlett sat on the balcony overlooking the garden bathed in silver moonlight. They sat in silence for a long time. Not an awkward silence, but the easy silence of 2 people who had survived too much together, a glass of red wine in Scarlett's hand, and a glass of whiskey in Vincent's. Both of them looking into the night as if searching for something. Vincent was the first to break the quiet, his voice low and slow as if every word had to climb over a high wall to escape. "Do you know why they call me the Stone King?" Scarlett turned to him, her green eyes shimmering in the moonlight. She shook her head slightly and waited. Vincent looked down at the whiskey in his hand, his gaze distant, as if staring into a past he had tried to bury for almost 20 years. "When I was 18, my father was betrayed and killed in front of me. I watched him bleed to death in my arms, and could do nothing. That night I swore I would never let anyone hurt me like that again. And the only way to do that was to care for no one, love no one, have no weakness." He took a sip of whiskey and went on, his voice rougher as if the memories were tightening around his throat. "I built that wall around myself for 20 years. I thought love was weakness, that if I cared for no one, then no one could hurt me, and I succeeded. I became the Stone King, the man without a heart, the man the underworld feared." He turned to Scarlett, gray eyes meeting green, and there was something soft and painful in his gaze she had never seen before. "But I was wrong, Scarlett. I was completely wrong. Weakness is not having someone to love. Weakness is having nothing worth protecting, nothing worth living for, nothing worth fighting for. You and the children, you are not my weakness. You are the reason I want to be stronger, the reason I want to live, the reason I want to be a better man." Vincent set his glass down and turned fully toward her, his voice trembling slightly as he said what he had wanted to say for a long time. "I never apologized for those 4 years, for not being there when you needed me, for you having to raise 3 children alone in hell while I lived in luxury and did not even know they existed. Scarlett, I am sorry. No apology is enough for what you endured, but I will spend the rest of my life making it right if you give me the chance." Scarlett felt tears rise in her eyes at those words. She had not thought he would change. She had prepared herself for him to be only a father who sent money and disappeared. She had not dared hope for anything more, but he was here, every day, reading to the children, burning pancakes, letting them paint his nails pink, and she knew this was the real Vincent, not the Stone King but the man she had loved 4 years ago. "I did not think you would change," Scarlett whispered with a trembling voice. "I tried to hate you for 4 years. Every night the children were sick. I hated you. Every time I could not buy milk, I hated you. But I could not." She stopped and looked straight into his eyes. "I never stopped loving you, Vincent. No matter how I tried, no matter how angry I was, I loved you through every sleepless night, through every time I saw you in our children's eyes." Vincent lifted his hand and tilted Scarlett's chin, his fingers trembling as they touched her skin, and he said in a low, honest voice, "Give me a chance, Scarlett. Not as the Stone King, not as a Mafia boss, but as a man who loves you, a father who loves his children, and if you will have me, as a husband who wants to spend his life with you." Then he leaned down and kissed her, gentle and careful as if she might shatter if he pressed harder. Their first kiss in 4 years. After 4 years of pain and longing and loneliness, and Scarlett cried into that kiss, crying from happiness, from relief, from finally being allowed to love him without hiding it. They did not know that behind the glass door to the balcony, 3 gray eyes were peeking through with curiosity and excitement. Oliver whispering with barely contained delight that Dad was kissing Mom, and Ethan pulling the other 2 away with the seriousness of a little adult, telling them not to watch, and to let their parents be, and to go back to their room. 6 months after that autumn night kiss on the balcony, the life of the Castellano family had changed in ways no one could have imagined. Scarlett stood in the middle of her own art gallery in Manhattan, a spacious room filled with natural light and paintings created by her own hands. A dream she had abandoned 4 years earlier now made real. Her first exhibition more successful than she had dared to hope, with dozens of paintings sold to wealthy collectors. The children were playing in the corner, set aside for them in the gallery. Oliver running around like a little whirlwind, proudly telling everyone that his mother was the best painter in the world. Noah completely healthy, with no trace left of the heart condition that had almost taken his life. And Ethan quietly sketching something on paper with deep concentration. Vincent stood in a corner watching his family with a small smile on his lips. Having stepped back from most of his underworld work and left it to Marco so he could focus on what truly mattered, Ethan ran to him holding a piece of paper with bright gray eyes and said, "Dad, I finished my drawing." Vincent took it and felt his heart tighten when he saw 5 stick figures holding hands in front of a big house. 3 small ones in the middle and 2 taller ones on each side. And above it, Ethan had tried to write, his letters crooked and uneven, spelling out Family. Vincent knelt and hugged his son and thanked him and told him he loved the drawing, and Ethan hugged him back with the brightest smile he had ever given. And in that moment, Vincent knew it was time. He reached into his jacket and touched the small velvet box he had carried for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. He stood and walked to Scarlett, who was talking to a guest, gently drew her aside and knelt in the middle of the gallery before everyone. Scarlett covered her mouth when he opened the box to reveal a diamond ring. Not the biggest or most expensive, but one with a pale green hue like her eyes, and Vincent said her name and told her she had given him the greatest miracles any man could dream of. 3 wonderful children and a second chance to be the father he should have been. That she had survived 4 years of hell alone and was still strong enough to return and save their children. That she was the bravest woman he had ever known, and he wanted to spend the rest of his life loving and protecting her, and asked her to be his wife. The children ran to his side, Oliver jumping and shouting, "Tell her yes, Mom," while Noah and Ethan held hands and looked at her with hope. Scarlett cried and smiled and nodded and said yes, 1,000,000 times, yes. Vincent slid the ring onto her finger amid applause and kissed her gently, while the children clung to their legs, laughing. The wedding took place 1 month later in the garden of the Castellano estate. A small, warm ceremony with only those they loved. Not a lavish spectacle, but a simple celebration of love. The children served as little attendants in tiny suits. Oliver nearly dropped the rings twice. Noah carried flowers seriously, and Ethan stood beside his father as the little man of the family. And when Scarlett walked toward Vincent in a simple white dress with her auburn hair braided softly and green eyes shining, Vincent felt tears rise and did not hide them. Later, as guests celebrated, his phone buzzed with news of a lucrative deal, but he silenced it and put it away. Oliver pulled his hand, saying, "Dad, the cake has 3 layers, let's go eat." And Vincent laughed and lifted him onto his shoulders and walked toward his wife and sons by the cake. The Stone King had almost married for power and ambition once, but 3 small boys had entered his life and called him Dad, and everything changed. He learned that true wealth is not numbers or power, but the laughter of children in the morning, and the kiss of the woman you love at night, and the ordinary, priceless moments money cannot buy. And this story reminds us it is never too late to change, never too late to love, and sometimes the greatest miracles come from where we least expect them. And if this story has touched your heart, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss more stories. Like and share this video with those you love. Tell us how this story made you feel, and whether love has ever changed your life. Thank you for watching to the very end. Wishing you health, happiness, and days filled with peace and love. Goodbye and see you in the next video.